Now, so one thing that I am particularly interested in with China, and even a lot of my East Asian friends, when I talk to them, they tell me this all the time about how China is like racist, right? And these are even like some of my close homies, and they're not telling me this like to be disrespectful, but they're like, oh, I don't know, I heard that there's some clubs that they don't let you in if you're black and all kind of stuff like that. I don't know if you've experienced anything like that during your time there.
Yeah, for sure. I've seen certain instances that, as a black man who's grown up in the U.S., I know racism. Full stop. I understand what racism is, So when people talk to me about racism specifically in China, I think the main problem is that it's not racism, it's mostly ignorance. It's mostly a society of people who don't have a relationship with black people, whether that's black Americans, black Caribbeans, or people who come from the motherland, from Africa.
Yep.
And because of that, it creates some of these scenarios that do portray themselves as racism, but really it just comes down to misinformation and ignorance. I have plenty of friends from China who I've spoken with directly, and they've told me things they've heard from the media about black people. And they're willing to learn and understand that, oh, okay, these are things I've heard. Okay, these things are true. Okay, cool. And they let them go. And I think it's just more about, becoming more engaged with the information, but also more engaged with people that don't look like you. And I think this is something that over time, as China becomes more of an open society and the people have more access to digital technologies, it's not something that will perpetuate itself. I've heard things from certain people that I wouldn't attribute to the entire Chinese society.
Sure.
But in saying that, again, like there are certain instances where I've seen things happen with foreigners that race isn't a factor. It really just comes down to living in a society that is different from where you and I come from. I mean, there are instances like where I've had friends tell me they've gone to places like Beijing, and a Chinese tourist will grab their hair or touch their hair or something like this. And of course, like this goes back to one of the points I made previously. Like you would never do something like that in the U.S. Obviously, there are instances where people try to. When I had an afro, people try to touch my hair, for example. And obviously, it's something you just don't do. And over time, you learn that as an adult. Whereas, like my Chinese friends, they treat me just like they treat their other friends who are Chinese. And, over time, you have to build up these sorts of interactions where it's like, okay, I'm not comfortable with this. Please don't do that. Yeah. And it becomes a part of the relationship development. So I'd like to say, of course, I've witnessed these sorts of things as well. Like, I've had friends from Shanghai and Beijing tell me stories before as well about people they've met on the streets who want to take photos with them and this sort of thing as well. It's happened to me. And there are some things that are really annoying, like people trying to sneak photos of you on the English word for it, the subway. I'm thinking Chihuai, the subway station or the underground rail system. And, these sorts of things are annoying. You don't want people secretly taking photos of you. Some people embrace it and they think it's cool. Sometimes they'll pose with the person who's trying to sneak a photo of them. But these sorts of things are really just come from a society that's still developing and growing, where there are people who are interested in learning new things, and they don't always have those mechanisms to figure out how to get from, hi, I'm a stranger, I'd like to introduce myself to you, stranger, on the middle of this train because you're a foreigner and I've never met a foreigner before. These kinds of things. And I think it really is just a learning process.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so it sounds like it's a lot less overt racism than it is kind of like you said, a lack of familiarity in it with Black people. And so either there may be some misinformation there, or in the case it may just be interesting to see someone that looks different than everyone else that they've seen in their life.
For sure. Because as I would say, we speak about racism, obviously being Black in America. When I jog in rural upstate New York, I have to be conscious about where I'm jogging.
Of course. Yeah.
Like I've had incidents where someone tried to drive me off the side of the road one day when I'm jogging, or actually it's happened to me at least 2 or 3 times over the span of the last 12 years or so, or people throwing things at me while I'm jogging outside, not in my neighborhood, but jogging around the area. So these sorts of things, that's what I would consider forms of racism. Someone actively trying to harm me because of the color of my skin, not someone trying to take a photo of me on a subway or in some tourist trap because I'm black and they've never seen a black person before.
Right.
So I try not to conflate those two things. And of course, other people may have different opinions about that, but that's sort of the way I'd like to explain it from my personal perspective.
Yeah, and I think that we share that perspective. I certainly feel the same way.